Is John Coupal?
Everything's ready to go. Let us get it. Let's get ourselves started. For everyone who doesn't know the famous Susan Shelley, our leader at Valley Vote, we are so thankful to have her with us and to be our leader. And she does so many things so well. It's hard to list them all. But we would like to get started so we can hear from John.
Okay. Is John with us? Did he dial in? Is he here?
I'm here.
He's on.
Oh, great. Hi.
Hi.
You have better technology than I do. I've been struggling with it tonight. Well, welcome, everybody. Welcome to Valley Vote. This is the organization that originally was formed to help secede from the city of Los Angeles, which did not work, but we're still at it and working to inform people about the important issues going on in the state of California and locally. And we are so honored today to have the president of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, John Coupal, with us. So let me kick off the meeting the way we usually do with a flag salute. Denny, do you have a flag handy?
Of course I do.
Okay.
And as always, I point out that there are lots of American flags and only one California.
One is enough if you play your cards right. Okay, if everybody's ready, please put your hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all very much. So with no further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce the president of the organization that put Proposition 13 on the ballot in 1978 and Proposition 218, the right to vote on taxes, in 1996, I think it was, and has done so much great work for taxpayers in California. More than you know, in court, on the ballot, all the time lobbying in Sacramento. As bad as things are, they would be so much worse without the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association and our special guest tonight, Mr. John Coupal. John, welcome.
Hi, Susan. How are you? Gee, we
I'm
never
fine.
get to talk anymore, huh?
Thank you for doing this tonight.
Well, it's good to see you. Good to see Denny, and I recognize a lot of these other names. And Denny, I just gotta let you know, Susan's my leader too. So
so
no,
much flattery, so little
so
sincerity, but so much flattery.
Let me offer one more
She-
suggestion.
I'll be straight with you. She's been such a fantastic addition to the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. And as if you all know her, so you're all familiar with her energy level. So a pleasure to be here and an opportunity to speak to your group. I may ask that everybody please mute your Zoom, because I'm getting a little bit of feedback. I'm hearing myself.
Yeah, Aaron, I think we're hearing Denny. Can you mute Denny for us?
Okay.
There, I think that's good. All yours.
I'm doing it.
Okay. So sounds good. Thanks, everybody. Well, you know, we could, if we're talking about taxes in the state of California, how many hours do we have here? Midnight? No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just go over a couple highlights. And Susan, send me a text if we lose the signal. I think we should be okay. But as Susan mentioned, you know, we're known for Proposition 13. That was really the beginning of the modern tax revolt movement. Howard Jarvis, in a testament to his tenacity, tried to get property tax relief in the state of California for many times, and failed many times. But again, because he never gave up, which is again reflective, I think, of our national history of patriots never giving up. It was he finally put Proposition 13 on the ballot, which of course gave us a really substantial property tax relief. And again, as Susan said, as bad as things are in the state of California, they would be so much worse if it were not for Proposition 13 and the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. Most of you already know Proposition 13 limits your property tax rate to 1%. And just as important, if not more important, is the limitation on annual increases in taxable value to 2% a year. And of course, property is reassessed to full market value when it changes hands. So this is a system. The system of Proposition 13 has not only saved California homeowners and businesses, it's actually been good for local governments by stabilizing the property tax revenue stream. California is not a low property tax state. We rank 17th out of 50 states in per capita property tax collections. And even progressive states like New York have adopted some aspects of Prop 13, insofar as they've limited annual increases in taxable value, particularly for residential properties. So again, Prop 13 has been great. It's also been very wise tax policy. However, in the last, since 1978, as everybody knows, we've been under constant attack. It's this constant push-pull by government to punch loopholes in Proposition 13, and then we have to fill the loopholes. We did a Proposition 68 in 1986, and then we had Prop 218, the Right to Vote on Taxes Act, in 1996, and then we tried to redefine fees and taxes to make sure that government wasn't avoiding the 2/3 vote for special taxes by calling something a fee. We did that with Prop 26, and yet the government, every time we draft one of these, and by the way, we're drafting another initiative for kind of this global tax reform. We're working with the business community on this, and I feel like every time we draft this, we need to end it with, and this time we really mean it, because government simply does not respond well to the desires of the voters. I want to thank everybody for all your support. We cannot do what we do without our grassroots organizations out there, and certainly Valley Vote is one of them. You guys are our eyes and ears as to what's going on out there, and you've seen taxes go up, and we really applaud the local taxpayer groups for their help, and they were instrumental in defeating a lot of the bad propositions last election cycle, the rent control initiative. We actually passed some help for the notion of independent contractors. And of course, the one measure that we really focused on the most at Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association was to fight the split roll. And we successfully did that. By the way, that was a massive campaign. We allied ourselves with the business community. The split roll would have raised property taxes on businesses, and the proponents of split roll made it clear that they were coming after businesses first, and then that they were going to come after homeowners next. So we knew that this was really the first step in the full dismantling of Proposition 13, which is why we joined that coalition. Again, a huge political fight. $80 million in campaign expenditures was spent by each side for roughly a total of $160 million on the pro side and the no side on that one campaign. And again, we won, but it wasn't. It was closer than I really wanted. It's about 52% to 48%. I would really have liked to have crushed it, but we didn't. And unfortunately, I think we're going to be seeing another attack on high-valued properties. Something to be watching. It hasn't qualified yet, but it is another kind of like split roll that the progressives are pushing for 2022. It's not really a split roll, it's a split rate. They want to tax high-value properties at a higher tax rate, including homes. Now, the cutoff is like $5 million, which, you think, well, that's just not too many people own $5 million homes, but be careful, This is another example of where the progressives, with a massive tax increase, want to start dismantling Proposition 13. So we're going to be involved in that one as well if it qualifies. From what we've seen, there are a lot of drafting errors in that initiative. So we'll watch that. Geez, Susan, I can't remember how many. There's got to be at least 20 initiatives that we may be facing in
I think
November.
24 have been
20
filed, so they won't all
24,
make it,
so-
but yeah, 24.
So yeah, it's we really got to pay attention because taxpayers are going to be under assault. And let me point out at this point, if you have a question, I think we have a chat feature here. You might want to, Susan, you can watch the chat.
I am using my phone, and I don't know if I can watch the chat.
Okay,
I'll
well,
try.
maybe Denny or Aaron or somebody could. Well,
Yeah,
so
Denny,
just-
can you
they can
watch the chat?
Yeah, they can probably monitor that, and if not, don't worry about it.
Okay.
But again, if you have a question, just let us know. Now, if you've heard from Susan, then you know very clearly that one of our big fights right now is to reverse the damage that was done by Proposition 19, which passed in last November. Now, let's go through the history of what we're doing and why we're doing it. As I mentioned earlier, Prop 13 limited the tax rate to 1%, and increases in assessed valuation are limited to 2% annually. Property is reassessed to full market value when it changes hands. In 1982, the people of the state of California repealed the California estate tax, but unfortunately that did not have an impact on the taxable value of real estate. So although Californians were protected against estate taxes at the federal and state level with things like stocks and other wealth, what happened was when people tried to pass along property to their children or grandchildren, it was reassessed to full market value, which resulted in tax burdens that they probably couldn't even afford, and they had to start selling their property. So because of that, the California legislature, this gives you an idea of how different the California legislature was back in 1986 compared to today. By unanimous vote of the California legislature, they put a measure on the ballot, Prop 58, and it passed by 76% of the electorate, which said that parents could convey real estate to their children without triggering a reassessment. And that was certainly consistent with getting rid of the estate tax. And of course, one thing you may be hearing at the federal level is the effort by the progressives to get rid of stepped up basis. They want to get rid of very important protection at the federal level. We'll be watching that. But as it relates to what we're doing right now at Prop 19, up until last November, parents and grandparents could convey real estate to their children and grandchildren upon their death without triggering reassessment. Very, very important protection. Now, in 2018, the California Association of Realtors supported an initiative called Proposition 5. And what that dealt with is the ability of California homeowners to take their Prop 13 base with them to another county virtually without limitation. In other words, no longer would there be a limitation to what county you could transfer it to, and no longer would there be a limitation that you had to buy a house of equal or lesser value. So we like that a lot. We like the idea of portability. We believe that people who are now protected by Prop 13 should be able to move to another county and take at least a portion of their Prop 13 base with them to another county. And we supported that. That was sponsored by the California Association of Realtors. But they were scared off by the progressives who told them that they would fight that tooth and nail. And the word from the progressives to the realtors was, you guys can't do this unless you find a way. You can't do portability unless you find a way to pay for it. Now, what do they mean by that? Well, what they meant to the realtors was you've got to go out and find a tax increase. So the tax increase that the realtors signed off on was an elimination, a virtual elimination of this intergenerational transfer protection. But that was $1 billion property tax increase. Now, what was interesting about the last election cycle and Prop 19, number one, Prop 19 barely passed. The realtors spent like $50 million. The only organized opposition to it was really from the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. And I don't think we even spent $500,000 because we were very focused, as I said earlier, on split roll, which was more of an existential threat to Proposition 13. So had we known it was going to pass by only a little bit, maybe we would have spent more money. Maybe we should have focused more on that. But hey, coulda, shoulda, wouldas don't count for anything. So, but what we have now is we have a virtual elimination of the intergenerational transfer. During the campaign, the proponents hit the airwaves and the TV stations with all these messages about helping the disabled, helping firefighters. There was nothing said about getting rid of that intergenerational transfer protection. But about a couple of weeks before the election, we started getting calls. Hey, have you guys seen this? Have you guys seen what? And we're saying, yes, we've seen it. We've been trying to tell people that Prop 19 had a poison pill in it, that it had this huge tax increase in it. And I think it was too little too late. We did get a lot of editorial support against it, but again, we were overwhelmed by the campaign financing of the proponents of Proposition 19. So it passed, and of course, immediately, our phones began to ring off the hook. And I mean, we were getting dozens of calls, both of our offices in Los Angeles and in Sacramento were getting calls nonstop about Prop 19. What can we do? How do we reverse this? The Prop 19 had an effective date of February 16th of this year. So people were scrambling, trying to transfer property to their kids or grandkids before it took effect. But that was a very, very limited remedy. I'm speaking to the County Assessors Association tomorrow, and the assessors got tons of calls. They were confused. Prop 19 was poorly written, and the Board of Equalization, they were confused. They were angry. There was a lot of anger out there at this poorly drafted initiative that took away a very important protection for California homeowners. So we oppose 19. We like the portability, and we want to reverse only that aspect of Prop 19 that deals with the intergenerational protection. A lot of this was spurred by there was an article in Los Angeles Times pointing out that the Bridges brothers, I don't know how many of you remember Lloyd Bridges of Sea Hunt. He was an actor. He had two sons who were also actors, Beau Bridges and Jeff Bridges. Well, he had a house in Malibu right on the water, and they had taken advantage of this intergenerational transfer. And the LA Times just focused on this, how this protection only benefited the wealthy and out-of-state investors. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. That intergenerational protection protects so many people, and we have heard from minority groups, small businesses. We've heard from owners of small businesses who have had that protection completely stripped away from them. So it is our goal right now, and as many of you know, particularly if you've been hearing from Susan, that we are gearing up to try to reverse or reinstate the protections that were in Proposition 58, the intergenerational protection. We originally called our campaign Reinstate 58, but I think we've pivoted to calling our campaign Repeal the Death Tax. So I think that's what it is. It's a death tax. It's a wealth tax. It's a horrible tax. and that's what we're trying to do. So what we're trying to do, I don't know how many of you remember, it was an old cartoon with Sherman and Peabody. It was just a little skit done by Hanna-Barbera, I think, where they would jump in a Wayback Machine and go back in history to try to make sure that history wasn't altered. Well, we want to jump back in the Wayback Machine, not hundreds of years, but just back to last October when we had this protection. Let's just go back to what it was. Now, we do make one slight change, and that is for non-residential property, the protection under the old rule was you could exclude $1 million worth of property value, but that hasn't changed at all. It was not pegged to inflation. So what we did is we applied an inflation factor to it, and we say for non-residential property like a small business, you can pass along to your child or grandchild real estate and exclude at least $2.4 million worth of value. If it's higher than that, that will be taxed to full market value. But that 2.4 million is pretty substantial. So that's what we're trying to do. We hope you join us. I suspect many people on this Zoom call have already joined us. We are in dire need of volunteers to get signatures. Susan has done an outstanding job of compiling hundreds of a list of volunteers, because as soon as we get the title and summary from the Attorney General, which is going to be in a matter of probably less than 2 weeks, we will have to pull the trigger on getting the signatures. So we need those signatures, I believe, by April 22nd, sticks in my mind. But and you're thinking, well, that's a long way off. I mean, November of 22 is a long way off. Look, we have to get 7,500 valid signatures a day for 7 days a week between now and April. So that is a heavy lift, and we need all hands on deck to help us reinstate this protection. We're focusing on this, and obviously we'll continue to protect Proposition 13 in the courts, and our full-time lobbyist will continue to advocate for taxpayers in the California legislature. But this is a pretty high priority item for us, and we could certainly use your help. So at this point, I'll just be happy to entertain questions about HJTA and what we're doing and how important it is to reinstate this intergenerational transfer protection.
Okay, thank you so much, John. Denny, can you see the questions? I'm not able to see the chat on my tiny screen here.
Oh, I see some questions.
Okay.
Sonny asked, what about properties owned by a family trust? The existence of a trust has no impact one way or another on Prop 19. For example, if the trust is owned by the parents and it's conveyed to the kids, under the old rule, they had protection, under our, if we reinstate Prop 58, then there'll still be protection. The existence of a family trust, the same rules apply whether or not there is a trust or whether or not the property is conveyed by probate or a will.
Right. The assessors look through the trust, so a trust does not have any effect on property taxes.
Right.
Any other questions in the chat?
I see somebody who's just citing Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1. I'm not sure what the, I see. Somebody says, I have to scroll back a little bit. Is that
Yeah. Oh, sorry about that. That was me. That's my bad.
Okay, is that 2.5 million subtracted from the total value of the commercial property? Yes. So if you convey the property, the assessors will come in and attach a value, but you'll be protected of up to 2.4 million of the value of the conveyed of the bequeathed property.
Right. And that's the assessed value, the enrolled taxable value, not the current market value.
Right.
So it's a little better than it sounds.
Yeah.
There's a couple people with their hands up, but I wanted to ask ask Ed, did you get your question answered?
Well, I apologize. I hit enter before I was able to finish typing out my question, and I just put that up there. But just so you know, this is the first time on this meeting. I've never been on here before, so I'm just learning all about this and what this organization's about and all this stuff. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. My area of expertise is in legislative monetary history and monetary provisions as it relates to the Constitution itself. And one of these provisions is Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1, where it says that no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debt, which means that the state is prohibited from paying its debts in anything but that particular species, which means it must collect all its taxes in that same species. However, Congress has failed in its responsibility to provide that species, so the states have defaulted with respect to using Congress's Federal Reserve notes, under Title 31, 5103, 12, Section 411, etc. So my question to you guys is, why not address the issue with respect to these taxing problems from a constitutional standpoint? Because this is such a unambiguous provision, and it would seem that this is something they have to follow. The state does, and there's case law on this as well.
It would seem so, but that issue's been litigated, and it has gone up and been rejected by the federal court. So
I know all those court case law. You get Ripping case, the Juilliard decision, not case. It has not been litigated properly,
okay.
And it hasn't actually been adjudicated in a way that has been. Actually, the Riffin case actually says and acknowledged the fact that the state is limited to gold and silver for payment of debt, but then they tie it into the federal, which is incorrect. So there's a way there. I mean, it's just I think it needs to be talked about.
Okay.
Well, thank you for the question. We at the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, we're more focused on state tax law than federal.
Well, this is what this deals with.
monetary
This is
issues.
exactly what
Yeah.
it deals with, because it deals with the state's debts, and the state has to pay debts in the species by which the Constitution requires. It's a
well-
limitation on the state itself.
Thank you for raising that issue. I think we have a question from Sid Gold. Sid, are you there?
Yeah, he's muted.
Yeah,
I unmuted him.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Susan, and thank you, John. My question is, where does the real estate people stand now? Are they still, do they have any doubts about what they got passed, or are they still favoring?
Well, that's a great question, because we had a conversation with Carr with the realtors not too long ago, and and I'm not going to get involved in internal realtor politics, but the reality is they got a lot of pushback from a lot of their chapters for pushing this, and particularly Orange County Realtors, San Diego, Riverside. There were a lot of realtor associations that were not very happy with their leadership for passing or pushing Proposition 19, and there was some internal discord there. After it passed, we had a conversation with Carr. And right now they're in a position of neutrality. They did say, we want to see if your initiative is going to become viable, but they seem to suggest that they could actually be in a position of support. Now, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but it seems to me that they're not going to oppose. And if we qualify this thing, I think a lot of their members will really advocate that their state leadership actually come out with a position of support. Keep in mind that what they got out of Prop 19, 90% of what they wanted was portability, and they got that. They got the portability. So the question is, to what extent is the loss of the intergenerational transfer important to CAR? I don't think it is. In fact, I think there's some value to them by reinstating that particular protection. I saw another question here. How many signatures are required? We need just shy of 1 million valid signatures, 997,000. But what that means, we need to go out and collect about 1.3 million, because you always have validity issues and people who sign in good faith, but they sign the wrong petition from the wrong county. If you're a resident of Los Angeles and you happen to see somebody and you're driving through Orange County and you sign the petition, but it's an Orange County petition, that's not a valid signature. So we really have to shoot for 1.3 million. The good news is when Jarvis has done initiatives in the past, the validity rate of our signatures tends to be very high because we have pretty engaged members and pretty smart voters. So we'll keep that in mind.
Okay, I think Margaret had a question. Margaret, are you there? And then Dave W. had a question.
There, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much for doing this. I've been so worried about what I do for my kids when I pass. I'm on the Rosie City Council, and we, many cities have been fighting the SB 9 that took away the local control for our cities of zoning so that you can have a sixplex right next to your single family home. And so when we were trying to fight that, we said, this is really going to hurt the minority communities. There were Black homeowners that were very upset about it. And unfortunately, we lost that. But on this campaign, I hope you could reach out and talk about gentrification and all these things that are going to hurt them the most, because the generational wealth is in your house. And Lynetta McElroy is one that has said that very thing. And what I want to know is, because there's an initiative being processed right now that stopped the California land grab. And so will these two be getting the signatures at the same time if it's aiming for November? Because when we're going around, if I have 2 or 3 petitions, I can do it all at the same time. So do you know, is it the same basically time frame for this one and that? Because it would be November 2022, right?
Yeah, yes, and there's quite a bit of overlap in the timing between the two. So we have Susan and I have both been in communications with the advocates for that local control initiative, and we are certainly open to the idea of coordinating, or at least letting people get signatures on both, and for the people who believe, who feel compelled to protect homeowners in both ways, I think that makes a lot of sense. So we will more than likely be coordinating with them. I'm not sure we'll have combining our campaigns, but certainly
just at the same time.
Yeah, just for the purposes of signature gathering, I would think that makes a lot of sense.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Margaret. And we have a question from Dave W. Dave, are you there?
Yes, he is.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, first of all, it was Jay Ward, not Hannah and Barbara, that did Mr. Sherman and Peabody.
Okay, hold on. Say that again.
Was it Jay Ward, who did also the Dudley Do Right, who did the Mr. Sherman and Peabody.
Okay.
So,
well, Snidely Whiplash is one of my favorite characters. So
yeah. I keep hearing with the businesses, the commercial property, one business transfers 50%. There's no trigger in assessment. Then he transferred the other 50%. Can that be a way for parents to transfer property to their children? They transfer 40% one year, then 30% the next year, then 30% the year after that, and therefore the assessment never changes?
no, I would certainly be careful there. In order to take advantage of that particular loophole is very complicated. It usually involves the creation of a LLC or a partnership. And that is certainly what Michael Dell did when he purchased the Santa Monica Hotel worth, $100 million. That he structured it with a LLC that he bought 40%, his wife bought 40%, and then he had some other investors as a way to avoid the 50%. Now, keep in mind that 50% is not a part of Proposition 13. It is in statute, and the legislature can change that. Jarvis has actually advocated for a changing of the rules to say that 90% transfer of the control should trigger reassessment. And by the way, the business community supports that because we've all recognized that there have been certain abuses of these very creative land transactions involving limited liability corporations and partnerships structured solely to avoid triggering reassessment. And even Howard Jarvis recognized that that was an abuse. So there's some room there for correction, but the progressives don't want to do a minor fix because it takes away their number one talking point, which is these corporations are getting away with murder. But we've made it clear, and we've sponsored legislation that the progressives kill that would address the most flagrant of these abuses. Now, as it relates to Proposition 19, I don't see how that really applies because you get the protection only upon death of the parents or grandparents. So, because if you do the transfers before, then you've got you can get reassessment, and also you have federal tax issues with stepped up basis if you do it before death. Remember, you can take advantage of stepped up basis only when the transfer is the result of the death of the parents.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and we had a question from Tony Bell. Tony, are you there?
Yes. Hi, guys.
Hi.
So great to be here tonight. It's good to see all of you. First of all, my wife, Marcella, had the first question, and then I have a follow-up, if that's okay.
Sure.
Actually, I just have a comment, and it was along the lines of what Dave had said, that when the LA Times article first came out that talked about the Bridges family, it was a bit disingenuous because the concept, that was a business, what we're talking about with respect to LLCs. That home was actually in an LLC and therefore was not subject to the Prop 19 provisions. And then the other comment is that we regular people, us who, would benefit from our parents or passing down to either our parents passing to us or passing down to our children, were the ones that were most affected. And all of those things were sort of thrown in sort of at the last minute, and then we didn't have time to catch up. So I want to thank you for the work that you're doing. And I will be reaching out to you because I want to help to get those signatures. And I thought I read somewhere very recently that we had until April to get those signatures. And someone else mentioned November, but I thought it was April of next year for the next cycle.
Right.
That's correct.
It is April, I believe, Susan. I've got it on the timeline. I've got my timeline right here.
I think the dead deadline to turn them in is April 29th. So we would have to set a deadline a little ahead of that to make sure that we can process everything and know exactly how many we have.
And then the only other comment I wanted to make about LLCs is you have to be really careful and definitely get legal advice if anyone's out here trying to find a way to circumvent that, because I believe that you have to have the LLC formed before the property transfers. You can't do the LLC after and then try to avoid the tax consequence.
Yes, it's a very good idea to talk to a lawyer and an accountant before you change the title on property in California. There are all kinds of tax consequences, capital gains and property taxes, and you want to really be careful with that.
Yeah, and after February 16th, a lot of those doors were closed. A lot of the estate lawyers were working 20-hour days prior to February to beat the deadline, the effective date. I know of someone who, a single dad had a son in college, and he ended up transferring property to his kid under the old rules, which he could do, and then changed the tenancy in common to joint tenancy. And he figured, but this guy was an experienced real estate lawyer. So he told me what he did, and I went, "Are you sure that's okay?" And he goes, "No, but I did it anyway." So you know, so you gotta be, you never know, because the assessors, remember, the assessors look at all kinds of things. They look at the recordings, but also when it comes to business properties, they read the local business journal, the Orange County Business Journal, the LA Business Journal, and they look to see what company bought what company. So even if it's owned by a corporation, if there's a parent company, the assessors will make an independent determination of whether or not the property has actually changed hands. It gets a little complicated, and the penalties for failure to report, again, this deals mostly with corporations. The penalties for failure to report are pretty stiff.
Yeah, I would imagine. And to follow that up, John, really quickly, my favorite cartoon was the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote, who I could probably say would be akin to those Republicans who supported this thing in the first place. And you know who they are, and why they were dastardly doing this, I don't know. Will they be on this second round? Will they be supportive of us or against us? Because they certainly are wily. And I thought that was just a real abomination, frankly. And the second part is about Carr. And I'm surprised that you thought maybe that it was just the portability, because if what do you call it, an heir receives a property and can't afford to pay the property taxes, there's going to be a lot more sales in California. Am I being overly cynical?
Well, both the portability and the loss of the intergenerational transfer would generate sales for the realtors. But one, the portability is going to be far more common, because there are a lot of parents who have no desire to give their real estate to their kids, and their kids would rather have their parents sell it and give them the money. So the portability was the lion's share. And of course they deny it. You know, the proponents said, "Oh no, this isn't about sale. We're just trying to do public good." And yeah, okay, fine. I'm not gonna criticize them. But you're right. The loss of the intergenerational transfer will generate some sales. But keep in mind, when we're talking about like a small number of apartment buildings, say you got a fourplex, you know who else is screwed by this is the tenants. Because if the property taxes go up by a factor of 3, the tenants are going to pay the price on that.
That's right.
So that's another demographic that we have to reach out to. And by the way, somebody had previously mentioned the impact of the minority community. When we were fighting this, there are 5 members of the State Board of Equalization, and one of the most, and we get support from certainly Ted Gaines, the Republican, and the BOE member down in San Diego, although he's a Democrat, he's very sympathetic to Prop 13. But Malia Cohen represents the Bay Area. She's a very, very progressive African-American woman, and she hated Prop 19 because she said in a BOE meeting, she said, this is one of the few ways my people, meaning, African-Americans, can pass along intergenerational wealth. She was adamant about this. So this is not a Republican versus Democrat issue. This is just a lot of people are getting hurt by this.
Indeed. Thank you, John.
Yeah. And as to the Republicans, I look, 30 years in Sacramento has told me to be cynical about everything. And the reality is the California Association of Realtors hands out a lot of campaign contributions. They just do. And there's nothing that's legal. They do it. And a lot of people like to take those contributions. And a lot of those Republicans who voted for this, and by the way, Prop 19 was put on the ballot by the legislature. Remember, it was although the realtors had qualified an initiative, because of some drafting issues, there were some last minute changes. So the thing was actually put on the ballot by the legislature, and a lot of the Republicans who voted for it have later told me, well, we didn't know what we were voting for. That's total baloney, because we made clear to them exactly what they were voting for. So they cannot plead ignorance that they did not know what was in this. And by the way, Jarvis has been traditionally had an alliance with the Republican Party, but right now there are some Democrats in legislature who have better voting records on our scorecard than Republicans. So we've kind of stopped looking at party affiliation and look purely at the votes, see if they're pro-taxpayer or anti-taxpayer.
Okay, do we have more questions? Denny, anything in the chat? Anybody have a hand up?
It looks like the chat was pretty much answered. It looks like Ed provided a document that people can read through.
Okay, thank you.
You know what? Maybe we will put that document. I'll run it by Susan later, but maybe something to put on our website or social media for people to check out later if possible.
Okay. All right.
Other than that, it looks like all the questions are answered.
Yeah.
Okay, well, John, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time, and we'll release you from the meeting, and then we'll stick around a little bit longer and talk about redistricting and local issues in LA. So thank you very, very much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. John Coupal.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure, guys. Be happy to. Zoom is easy, so if you need me to come back to talk about things, let me know. I'll be happy to do it.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
So everybody who's on the call who wants to be a volunteer, go to hjta.org, HJTA, Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, hjta.org, and click the red flashing light at the top to go to the Repeal the Death Tax Act site. Click the button to be a volunteer. And if you give us your address, we will mail you stuff. We'll mail you flyers like this. And we'll mail you pens, imprinted pens, which I've just dropped, that say repeal the death tax. If you can see that. And we'll mail you pins that say repeal the death tax. And most importantly, we will mail you the petitions so that when they're ready, you will get one immediately. So you can sign it, you can circulate it, you can help to get that 1 million signatures that we need. So go to hjta.org and click the red flashing light to go to the site, or you can just email me, susan@hjta.org or susan@susanshelley.com. Both will work, and I'll sign you up and look forward to working with all of you on this. So what do you guys think about redistricting and what's going on in the city of Los Angeles? I know many of you are involved in the neighborhood council system, and anybody have any thoughts on that? I'm going to turn it over to Denny and Aaron to moderate the discussion since I'm not able to see everybody.
For those that have not been paying attention, there are a lot of changes going on within the city as well as the county, especially impacting local communities and the areas within the area of the neighborhood councils. This is happening both in the valley and in the rest of the city. And you need to be very watchful as to what's coming out. We have 3 people online ready to ask questions or raise issues. The 3 that I see are Sid Gold, Jeffy, and Rudy. Let's just start with Sid, and let's just raise our questions, and then we'll continue on. Sid, you have to unmute. You have to be unmuted. Unmute yourself. I don't know how to unmute. Aaron, are you on? Can you help me unmute?
Lower left, tell them lower left. Hit the button with the microphone. Touch it.
Sid, if you can hear me, there's a button there, or just hold down the space bar while you're talking. We're not getting you, Sid.
Okay, well, let's come back to Sid. Let's go to Jeffy.
Hey, Danny.
We're trying to unmute people. It's having
Okay.
difficulty.
Well, while you're looking for that, let me just say that I was observing that the redistricting commission for the city of Los Angeles drew maps. And apparently some of the city council members are ready to throw those out and start over.
There's like a 3-dot thing.
Right.
Ask to unmute.
Ask to unmute. Okay.
And then that sends them a button to unmute themselves.
Okay. Thank
Now
you.
I'm ready. Okay, now I can go. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
just now. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
I was just going to follow up what Susan was talking about, the map. The San Fernando Valley is basically 1/3 of the population. It's
You back with me, Ernie?
We're entitled to really 5 or 5.5 seats.
Okay.
And the way it's being drawn, I think we're going to get sort of a mini split districts that slip into the city rather than staying in the valley. So I think it's again another attack on the valley, the map, at least the way the first proposals looked. I don't know how they'll stand, but Encino is going to be tied into West LA, and North Hollywood is going to be tied into Hollywood. They're going to break up parts of the valley to join with the city, and obviously have not any influence in what's going on. Anyway, that's my comment.
Okay, thank you. Jeffy, are you able to unmute yourself? I think *6 will do it if you're on your phone.
You should be able to do it right now.
See if you can get the keypad up and try *6. We're in Zoom
Jeffy.
purgatory tonight.
Go ahead and try. Rudy, I'm trying to
There we go.
unmute.
How's that?
There we go. We got
Rudy,
you, Jeffy.
I'm trying to
Thank you.
unmute you at the same time.
Okay.
Okay,
So
go ahead.
about the redistricting. So here's some things. David, I'm running for California State Assembly in the 45th district. Previously, Susan, you had run in that district and done extremely well. I ran last time and I'm running again. So the redistricting is affecting a lot of us that are running. What we need to do is you need to write the redistricting council and let them know that you do not want to redistrict certain districts like the 38th and the 38th Assembly where Suzette Valderas is, and that you don't want to redo the 27th where Congressman Garcia is. They're removing them out of Simi Valley, which is and they're making them go all the way to Malibu, and then that's going to get much of San Fernando Valley. This is happening in a lot of other districts. I happen to know about these because they're next to my districts and they do affect me. So by going in and sending emails, they are reading our comments. Let them know that you want to keep Simi Valley in the 38th and in the Assembly 38th and the Congressman 27th. And that they don't want that the people in the San Fernando Valley are not the same people that are voting in those areas. And they like to keep the districts the way they are. They will listen to you. They are paying attention, but keep it to the districts and not to the individuals. And that's some of the problems that we're having. My district seems to be getting larger, not smaller. And I would kind of like to see Encino and Tarzana maybe go into Studio City, Sherman Oaks, because their value's a little bit different than what's going on in Chatsworth and Northridge, Reseda. They're in a whole different economic status. So for me, redistricting and removing maybe those two cities would be helpful to my district. And, I know a lot of you are in the Valley, so I'm curious to know what some of you think about my thoughts on it.
Well, from what I know about it, it's really impossible to have too much influence on this because they're dealing with the Voting Rights Act and the population numbers. They have to have everything evened out. And it's a challenging thing to accomplish even with good motives. And I don't know that the motives are good, but it's interesting that you think that they'll listen to the comments. I hope that's true. And I hope that by talking about the San Fernando Valley as a community of interest, we can perhaps have some influence. I have to tell you, I'm not optimistic about that, but perhaps we can.
We have Rudy next.
Thank you, Denny. Hi, Susan. Good evening,
Hi,
everyone.
Rudy.
So Jeffy was talking about congressional districts and state legislative districts. I wanted to speak to the City Council, LA City Council Redistricting Commission. I've sat in on several of the meetings as a stakeholder. I live in the South Valley. Steph and I are in North Hollywood Studio City area and CD2. And the process has been very convoluted. For the first few months, the maps were labeled with letters, so it was unclear which council districts were being discussed. It's still very convoluted, and in fact, the deadline is actually this week to make comments to the LA City Redistricting Commission. And if you look at who's appointed, there are some political types that have some history and some famous last names and so forth. It's been a real disappointment. It looks like where we live, we're going to, it's not completely clear, but it looks like we're going to move into CD4. Sherman Oaks is moving into CD3, and 4 and 2 are essentially swapping city councilors. It's a real travesty what's happening in the San Fernando Valley. And if anything comes out of this, it might be time to reconvene a Valley secession movement, because the San Fernando Valley, particularly the South San Fernando Valley, is going to be destroyed in this new round of redistricting. Anyhow, those are my comments. Thank you.
Now, let me ask you, when you say the South Valley is going to be destroyed, what do you mean exactly?
He's
muted again?
He's unmuted. We need to unmute him.
Okay. Rudy, what do you mean exactly when you say destroyed? Destroyed in what sense?
Well, in my opinion, when I say destroyed, our communities are not going to be whole. They're not respecting the integrity of the neighborhood council boundaries in many cases and in many places. And I think, I have some pretty hard feelings about what's happening in CD2. If you really want to know how I feel about it, I'll tell you. Many people know that Krikorian was my opponent in the city council race in 2020. And I think Paul has pretty much thrown Studio City to the wolves at this point. He claims to be disappointed in the redistricting process. And we know that whatever maps they end up deciding has to go to a city council vote. But this process has been going on since May, and it feels like Krikorian came out late in the 11th hour to suggest that he's not happy with what's going on. But I think he's extracted everything he can get out of Studio City at this point, and he's just left us to fend for ourselves. It's really disappointing. Also, if you notice, the Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association they pretty much got everything they wanted. The Studio City Residents Association didn't do anything. Nor did the Studio City Neighborhood Council in terms of engaging with stakeholders and voters and movers and shakers in the community to get people involved in the redistricting process by submitting comments and attending the meetings that have been happening over the last several months. So maybe destroyed is a strong word, but it just feels like things are going to be very different going forward in the next election cycle as it pertains to city council districts.
So let me ask you, do the neighborhood councils get redrawn after the districts are redrawn? Or do they stay the same based on the neighborhoods?
I would defer to Brian in regards to that. I don't believe that's the case, but I don't know for sure. I think Brian could speak to that better than I can.
I can answer some of that. In the past, it has not occurred right after redistricting. The neighborhood councils have changed just on their own whenever they saw a reason to have to change after the fact. In order to facilitate this, I've got Ed next, Tony is next after that, then we're going to circle back to Sid and Jeffy. And so I'm looking to the two of you first to unmute yourselves now. I'm setting it up so that you can.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tony,
So I'm curious about if there is a legislative requirement motive for redistricting, or is this? Does anyone know of any other motive with respect to it, or like why? In other words,
well, it's required. the redistricting
I'm-
itself is required by the US Constitution. They have to do this every 10 years. They take
Okay,
census,
do
they
the
see where the
census.
people are. Right. And in California, we have a citizen redistricting commission. It used to be that the politicians drew their own districts. Now we have a citizen redistricting commission. And some people think that the politicians still are exerting a lot of influence through the groups that are coming in as citizen activists. So it's hard to know. You really can't take the politics out of politics, no matter what you do. People are pushing for their interests, and that's the political process. And the line drawing is part of that. How many voters from each party are in each district? How many areas that are very, very good for campaign contributions? Some of the, like for instance, Warner Center has lots of opportunities for a politician to raise money because they're always asking for variances to build something, and that creates an opportunity for campaign contributions. So politicians are working to try and get the political base that they want for wherever they're going from where they are now. So it's a lot of politics. It's partly a constitutional process. It's partly a political process. It's partly a sneaky process. But in California, we have this citizen process where they're asking for input, so people feel that they will be heard. And I would like to think that they are. I would like to think that that's the case. I'm very cynical. So I'd be happy to be proved wrong, but I'm very cynical.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the answer.
Sure.
Hey, guys, really quickly, maybe you can answer this question, but to Rudy's point, I just want to second what Rudy said about seceding. That's a great idea. Maybe we could also leave the county and be part of Ventura County. I think that would be cool.
That's a great idea. I'm all in.
But my dad was a congressman on the west side when his district extended from Point Wainimi to Point Magoo along the strip of the beach. And that Santa Monica was also in Bob Dornan's district at one point too, to show you what can happen during redistricting. And also during Buck McKeon's congressional time, Bishop, California was in the same district as Santa Clarita. So a lot, if you talk about communities of interest, very, very different. Working for Supervisor Antonovich for 15 years, we had pretty good luck with redistricting, but look what they did in Gloria Molina's district, where a judge actually overturned it because it was a Latina was elected Board of Supervisors, but it was the wrong kind of Latina.
The wrong kind. Wait a minute.
Yeah, because she was not. She was a Republican Latina, and the court said that doesn't reflect the population, and they overturned it. And that's how Gloria Molina got that supervisorial seat. So, but what's happening right now is Supervisor Barger in the 5th district, who took over for Antonovich. She's a champion of the Valley, as you know, VICA and everything else. They're trying to take away from her Porter Ranch, Granada Hills, and Chatsworth, and give her parts of Panorama City and Pacoima, which would be very, very different for the 5th district. So, and that would obviously weaken her position as well. So let's not forget about the county's redistricting as well, which is very, very important, of course, to our Valley interests. So,
well, what's involved? What's involved in suppose Valley Vote decided to get involved in the secession movement, and suppose we did want to join with Ventura County, or form a different county. Suppose we wanted to break up Los Angeles County and have 5 supervisors here just in the Valley. Seems like that would be fair, because it's an awfully big county and they can't really represent all the interests very well. So what's the process for breaking up the county?
I believe if it's anything like Santa Clarita Valley, who's been trying to turn themselves into their own county, or secede into Kern County sometimes, we would have to do Ventura because it's adjacent, I would imagine, or start our own. But I believe if it's anything like the city, it would require all 58 counties to vote for it, because it would be a state chartered jurisdiction, a state chartered municipality. We're actually, the county's part of the state.
So we would need all 58 counties to agree to it, or just a majority?
Let me get back to you on that. I'm not sure. It may require a statewide election to do it. John Coupal would know that. Where is he when we need him?
Oh, I will ask him. I'll ask him tonight by email.
Not a bad idea.
You know, something's got to change, because really this is we do not feel well represented, and that never seems to change. So we need to do something to change it. They've made secession very difficult from the city. And I'm
I'll
sure
work
it
on
isn't
that.
any easier from the
I'll-
county, but
I'll
it's
circle
something to,
back on that, Susan.
okay, yeah, it's something to think about. It's certainly an issue to raise. Certainly doesn't hurt to raise the issue and scare people into paying more attention to us. Next question. Denny, did we lose you? Well, thank you, Ed. I see your message there. Thank you for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. Denny, are you there?
I just unmuted. Somebody said I was actually going to second what you just said, Susan, about they deliberately made it with state legislation after we failed secession the first time. They made certain that we'd never be able to do it again. So it is exceedingly difficult to do so. I'm really frustrated about Catherine Barger, but to tell you the truth, if it includes Panorama City, don't just because you think of the Northeast Valley as being all Democrats, that's not necessarily true. Panorama City is relatively conservative. It's sort of a bridge between the Northeast Valley and the rest of the valley. And when we had the election for between Nori Martinez and well, help me out, a senior moment, lady who runs from the Department of Water and Power, who is a more conservative version. Her weaknesses were in the Northeast, extreme Northeast Valley. So when you come down here, people vote much more like old Van Nuys used to, or like west of the freeway votes now. So it wouldn't entirely devastate Supervisor Berger's district, but I think that would just be a bad thing to do because it's not the appropriate community of interest.
Well, I think whatever ideas you're advocating for on any side of the political spectrum, there's always a new audience that hasn't heard the arguments before and could decide differently than their parents did or than the previous residents did. So there are always opportunities to pursue sensible policies. Redistricting shakes everything up. Term limits shake everything up. The voters have said again and again, they're not happy. You know, that between the citizen redistricting, the term limits, and there was the third thing, the top two primary. Those are three major reforms that all speak to the same desire to shake it up and to have different names on the ballot. And the politicians are pretty slick at getting around whatever it is the voters have tried to do. Nonetheless, the voters remain dissatisfied, especially in the Valley, I would argue.
Richard, do you have a question?
Yes, you get a twofer for me. My wife is here too, Maria. I think with respect to the county redistricting, and Tony Bell, I think can back me up. I think Wednesday, this coming Wednesday is the last day to put in a comment for the county redistricting.
Okay.
Now my wife has a question.
Hi,
hello,
Maria.
Maria Fisk. I'd like to circle back to that issue. Susan, hello.
Hello.
About having part of the valley annexed by Ventura County. That's been a thought of mine for a very, very, very long time. It may not be as complicated as Valley secession was, but you know, that's an idea. I think that that might get some traction. Like you to consider.
I think Westlake Village and Calabasas and Hidden Hills and Woodland Hills would have some very earnest supporters of that proposal because LA County has not been good to the West Valley.
Don't forget Granada Hills.
And Granada Hills, yes. Well, we can, you know, it's okay with me if the whole valley comes, but certainly everything west of the 405 can certainly be in Ventura County. No reason not to.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Any more thoughts? Any more ideas?
Dave, you're up.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
There was a portion of Northwest LA County that successfully was transferred to Kern County. And if you look at an LA County map, you'll see a little notch of a part of LA County that became Kern County.
And how was that accomplished?
It was, the group just kept lobbying, and both county supervisors passed motions agreeing on the transfer. But
Oh.
they had to prove it was revenue neutral. So that might be a problem.
It would certainly be a problem. Okay, well, we'll look into it. And who's up next?
I think all the hands that were up have been answered.
Okay. Well, then I guess we can sign off for the evening. Thank you all for being here tonight. And if you'd like to get involved in any of these initiative campaigns, let me give you the websites again. The one for repealing, for reversing Senate Bill 9 and 10, the density housing bills, that's the Stop Sacramento campaign. So it's stopsacramento.org, stopsacramento.org. And you can read all about the local control initiative and sign up to volunteer and help them. They have, as we talked about earlier, the same 1 million signature requirement by the end of April. And it's very challenging to do it. That's not to say it can't be done, but it's very challenging. And then for the Repeal the Death Tax Act, go to hjta.org/repeal the death tax, or just hjta.org and push the red flashing light at the top of the site. It'll take you to repeal the death tax. Sign up to volunteer. Check out the death tax calculator, which is an electronic version of this. I don't know if you can see that, but it says how much will the death tax cost your family? And it will do the math for you. You put in what your current market value is of your house. It will do the math for you on what your kids would pay over 5 years, over 10 years, over 20 years, if it's reassessed to market value when they inherit it. It is brutal, and we're going to undo it. But we need your help. We need everybody to have petitions in their car. Wherever you are, get some signatures and then send them back to the Howard Jarvis office, and we will get them to the right place. So if there are no more questions, I want to thank everybody. Thank you, Denny. Thank you, Aaron. Thanks to the rest of the board, Ernie and David and Vic and Ralph, if you're all here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all the work you do for Valley Vote. And we will be keeping this up. We're going to keep trying to, I apologize for being so busy and not being able to do more, but we're going to try to keep this up every month. I welcome your suggestions for speakers and topics. You can write to me at susan@susanshelley.com or susan@hjta.org. I answer both. And thank you very much. Good night, everybody.
Susan.
Mhm.
Also,
Yes.
just to let everybody know, first of all, thank you for keeping this civil, and it was much better than last week's or last month's version. But we also record this video, and that will be available on the Valley Vote website soon. So if you ever missed the meetings, we do have them recorded.
Well, thank you very much for doing that. And thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we will see you next time. Take care.